Good afternoon and welcome to the Making Sense Project webinar for teachers. This is January 13th, 2016, the first of our webinars in the year 2016. So we're excited to have you joining us here at the new year and getting things kicked off with the rest of our school year series here. It's the third in our school year series, but the first one here in the new calendar year. My name is Hilary Hunt. I serve as a project coordinator for the Making Sense Project, and it's a pleasure to welcome you today and to moderate today's webinar. Here's our agenda for this afternoon. We're going to have three guest speakers today. Our first one is Holly Chase, who will be talking about Borrow to Grow and what you need to know. Then we have Maggie Kundson with Thrive and Shine, and Andrew Hill talking about successful financial education programs and some of the recent research that has been done in that area. So we've got three great presenters that I know you're going to enjoy hearing from this afternoon. These webinars, if you're not familiar or haven't participated in the past, they are a part of a larger partnership between the Pennsylvania Department of Education and Penn State University, and they're part of a series of economic education and financial literacy initiatives. We've done a lot with curriculum development, other professional development, and other programmatic pieces as well to help support teachers and schools in promoting and offering financial education or economic education in the classrooms. With the overall program, but especially with these webinars, we try and give you a mix of curriculum resources. So today that's going to be Thrive and Shine. Content knowledge, that's what Holly Chase will be talking about with the borrowing piece. And then professional information, which is where Dr. Hill will be plugging in on the research that's been done about what we see as working in financial education. So try and balance things out, knowing that everybody has a little bit different need. And hopefully you'll find something from each of these areas that'll be of interest to you. I'd like to thank and acknowledge our project partners, both Sally Flaherty with the Pennsylvania Department of Education and Dr. Kathy Bowen, Penn State University. As a reminder, as I said earlier, this is the third in our series here for teachers. We have three more still this school year, so please feel free to sign up for the remaining sessions. The next one on financial services, we're going to really talk in depth about some of the electronic resources that are available there, especially those that have been curated through our iTunes U course, which we'll go in depth on in that session as well. And then last but not least, I wanted to point out some of our teachers have applied for these Pathway to Financial Success grants in the past. I've talked about them on previous webinars. In the past, there was a stay tuned look for them opening up again in 2016, and indeed they are open. So any of you that are teaching at the high school level that would like to get additional resources or technology to support your program, please take a look at that. If you'd like assistance with that, please don't hesitate to reach out and let me know. And with that, I'd like to welcome Holly Chase, who is the Financial Education Officer at the Pennsylvania Housing Finance Agency. Holly, welcome to the webinar, and they are all yours.
Okay, just give me a minute, make sure that we are on track with my screen. Can you see my screen?
I sure can. Thank you so much. Looks good.
Excellent. I was that little nervous before. I have two screens on my computer, so I'm not technically savvy, so I always worry that I'm not showing the right one. But anyway, thank you, Hilary, for asking me to make a presentation to the teachers on borrowing to grow, what we need to know. And what we'll be talking about today, we're going to look at recognizing what it really means to borrow to grow. We'll look at the 6 key things we should know in order to borrow to grow, identify the cost of borrowing money, become familiar with credit reports and scores and how lenders use them, recognize the risk to cost relationship, we'll talk more about that, and then identify ways to improve credit worthiness. So here we get started. Tell me, look at the pictures coming up. We have tools, bling, vacations, cars, dinners out, shoes, love them, furniture, homes, gifts, puppies, education, a trip of a lifetime climbing the mountains, and a television set. What do they all have in common? Well, these are things that we traditionally use credit to pay for. The question is, though, how many of these items are really going to improve our financial picture? Well, let's take a look. How many of these can we use in order to grow our financial situation? Well, the television, probably not. Dinner out, probably not. Let's see, gifts, probably not. Furniture, no, you see where this is going. All these consumable items may really not be helping us in our financial future. But what's left, and I know there's a debate about the bling, you know, marrying well can help your financial future, but we'll leave that for another time. But really, when you see what's left, we have education, we have an asset that we can use to get to work to improve our financial situation. We may have tools for small business, and of course, a home is an asset that can increase our financial picture. So this is what we're talking about when we mean borrow to grow. If you're going to borrow money, make sure that it is going to improve your situation and not just to buy stuff. That's the wish list in borrowing to grow. Now, here are the 6 key things we should know in borrowing money. First of all, it's not yours, it's not free, it's not income, it can be taken away, it can be repaired, but it is an asset. So hopefully we'll get through the negative here and on a high note with it's an asset. So, number 1, it's not yours. Other people's money is what it is. When you're borrowing, you're using someone else's money. And we refer to it commonly in two terms. It comes in the form of credit, which is really the permission to use other people's money, or OPM as we like to call it. And then there's debt, which is the actual OPM that you've used and must pay back. And we tend to use these interchangeably, but it's good to remember that there is, in fact, a difference. And the debt categories out there, let's just talk about them. Debt can be secured, which means you pledge something as a promise to pay off the debt. Very common to pledge your home or pledge the car for loans that you take out against those. The next debt category is unsecured, which really means you promise to the best of your ability and in good faith to repay the debt. The third debt category, which isn't really a category, but I'd like to put them in here, garnishments, which are items or debts that you have that your salary, your tax refund can be essentially confiscated in order to pay them. Student loan debt is very common, child support debts, things like that. These are items that you can actually have the money taken away from you without your permission. So let's look at the types of credit. And there are 3 basic types of credit: revolving, installment, and service credit. With revolving credit, it's reusable. It's your credit cards. You have a certain credit limit. You use some of that credit limit for purchases. You pay it off, and you can use that credit again. The payments, monthly payments on these types of debts, they're flexible. They're based on your balance. And you often have a choice. Do you want to make the minimum balance or minimum payment according to what the credit card company says, or do you want to pay it all off? You really do have a choice. Now, installment credit or installment debt is a once and done situation. You borrow money for one purpose, you pay it off on a monthly basis, and it's done. You don't have access to that money again. For example, a mortgage loan, a loan against your automobile, a student loan, that type of thing. The payments are pretty inflexible. They're set based on the amount of money that you borrow, the interest rate, and the time you agree to pay it off. The next is service credit, if you will. It's the month to month. We often don't look at this as official credit, but it's a great way to get into the pattern of using a product or service and paying with it after, or paying for it afterwards. So, you know, our utility accounts, our cell phones, we use the service and then we are billed for what we've used. And of course, payments are based on, are variable and based on what your usage is. So let's look at number 2, which 6 things we need to know is it's not free. There are costs associated with it. Credit is convenient. Credit is, can be a really good thing, but again, it's not free. So some of the costs associated with revolving debt or credit cards, the interest rate that you'll pay on balances, there may be an annual fee. If you make a late payment, there will be a fee. There may be transaction fees, balance transfers, and things like that. Installment credit or debt, you're going to pay interest, of course. You might have an application fee. You might pay points or a percentage of the loan amount for various reasons. There might be documentation fees and things like that. For service credit, the cost is you're always going to have a late fee if you pay late. There may even be interest if it's an extended period of time that you owe on the account. So, how do we know? I guess the question really is, how do we make a determination with the type of credit, and when is it a good deal to get credit? And one of the things that I like to talk about is not shopping for a monthly payment. I think this is a very common thing that we do. We have our budgets. We want to have that payment fit within the budget. But are we really making purchases and making credit decisions based on that monthly payment? And again, the answer is a lot of us do that. So let's take a look at an example of, we'll take a client, let's call her Anna. Anna walks in, Anna needs a new car, and she walks into a car dealership, and Mr. Salesman here, as you can see on the screen, is all too happy to help her. This is a used car lot. And she walks in, and the car dealer says, well, what are you looking at here? And she says, wow, I like that car. And the sticker only says, it says $239 a month. That's terrific. However, and this is where the salesman comes in, what kind of a monthly payment are you looking at? And she says $200 a month. So this really is, it's a great car, but it's a little expensive. Well, let's take a look at what happens to Anna as she goes through the negotiations on shopping for the monthly payment. Let's take a look at what the sticker price breakdown actually is. The $10,000 car, 100% financing. Interest rate, according to the calculations, 7%. The term is 48 months. Monthly payment is $239 a month. Her total repayments at the end of the 4 years, 48 times 239, $11,472. So that loan or that purchase is really costing, the cost of that credit is $1,472. Again, Anna says, you know, it's a little bit high, I'm not sure, and of course the salesman says, let me see what I can do for you. And of course he goes into his manager's office and comes back out and he says, Anna, this is what I can do for you. If you put $2,000 down, that'll bring your monthly payment down to $192, which in theory is, of course, underneath her $200 a month limit. The total amount of her payments, 48 months times 192, comes out to $9,216. So the cost of that loan is $1,216. Anna comes back to the salesman and says, well, I don't have $2,000 to put down. And he says, tell you what, Anna, you look really good in that car. I think that's meant for you. Let me go talk to my manager and see what we can do. So, of course, he goes and talks to the manager, and they're really not talking about anything financial related, but he comes back and says, this is what I can do for you. $10,000 loan, 7%. If we extend that loan for 1 year, Anna, for 1 year, that'll bring your monthly payment to $198. However, that 1 year is actually 60 months. So that's 60 months times $198 per month. The total amount she'll be repaying is $11,880. In other words, the cost of that loan is $1,880. So Anna says, wow, you know, that's 5 years. She was really unsure about having a 5-year loan. So she says to herself, she says, maybe if I scrimp and save, I can come up with the extra $39 a month to meet that original monthly payment of $239 a month. Of course, the salesman is all too happy to say, let's jump on this, let's sign some papers. They go into the office and they sign some papers, and the salesman goes to his manager, comes back a few minutes later and says, Anna, there's some problem here. We looked at your credit, and it turns out that you have some issues in not, paying on time with some of your bills in the past. So we can't offer you the 7% interest rate, but we can offer you 8.5%. Now, you look at that 8.5%, that brings your monthly payment to $246. And of course, the salesman says, that's basically the cost of 2 lattes per month. Are you going to let 2 lattes per month stand between you and that wonderful car that you'll look so good in? Well, that comes out to, if you take 48 times 246, $11,808. So the cost of that loan really is $1,808. Well, by this point, Anna's really tired, and she says, you know what, I'm not sure. I'm going to go shopping around because I don't feel comfortable with this. And of course, the salesman says, whoa, 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 wait. If you leave here, Anna, you're not. I've got 2 other people that made appointments with me today to see that car. If you leave here right now, you're not going to get that car. So he says, let me see what I can do for you. Of course, he goes back into his manager's office, and they're, you know, talking about sports and things like that. And he comes back and he says, Anna, this is what I can do for you. I can give you that 7% loan rate. You don't have to go shopping around. All I need to do is charge you a one-time fee of $340. And then everything fits within your budget and you're happy with the 7% interest rate. All is good. So we take that 48 months times $239 a month plus the $340, brings the total amount of payments to $11,812, which means the cost of that credit is $1,812. Well, if you remember, oh boy, if you remember, the interest rate, or with the interest rate being 8.5%, the cost of that loan was only $1,808. So even though she's getting, you know, in theory a lower rate, she's actually paying more with that extra fee. And then if you go back and compare everything that we talked about here, you can see it can be very confusing, and the numbers are so easily manipulated that it's very confusing to go in and actually secure a decent loan for yourself. So the suggestion here, of course, is to make sure you're understanding, you know, the concepts about what numbers are being manipulated and what the cost of that credit actually is. Now, in our situation, Anna was a good girl. She wrote all this stuff down, and she said, you know what, I think I'm going to go someplace else. I'm going to save $2,000 for down payment, and good riddance. So anyway, the moral of the story really is to understand the 4 factors of finance. The more you put down, the higher the down payment, the cost of credit goes lower. The longer the term, or the amount of time that you borrow to pay back, the cost of the credit is going to go up. Of course, if your interest rate goes down, your costs go down. If the fees go up, the cost of your credit goes down. So this is really what we need to keep in mind when we're shopping for purchases, or shopping for products, and when we're going to finance them. It's just not a matter of monthly payment, because that can end up costing us more in the long run. So how do we actually know once we get a loan or we're shopping around how much these really cost? Well, there are disclosures. According to the Truth in Lending Act, lenders have to give you certain pieces of information so that you can go and shop for a loan and shop for terms that are best for your situation. So I'm going to go through this very quickly. Credit cards, of course, you need to know what your credit limit is, all of the fees associated with it, what the interest rates are that you'll be paying, what the minimum monthly payment is and how it's calculated, how the interest is calculated, the payment due date, the grace period, et cetera, et cetera. With installment loans, it's basically the same type of information, the loan amount and the term, the contract rate or your interest rate, all of the finance charges that are associated with the loan. You'll know what your principal, your monthly payment and interest will be, and your payment due date, and all of that good stuff, late fees when they're applied, et cetera, et cetera. And I know I'm going through this very quickly. When you're taking out a mortgage, you have to have other information disclosed to you. For example, the other costs associated with getting the loan. It might be an appraisal, credit report, escrow deposits, things like that. There may be monthly mortgage insurance and escrow amounts included in your payment. You may have cash that's due at closing. And also there's information on the house or the asset that you're pledging. And of course, there are other terms and conditions for all three types of loans that are disclosed. In other words, the point of reference really is to read through the Truth in Lending when you get it, when you're shopping around, so that you know exactly what the costs are going to be for this product or this loan. The third thing that we want to know, we should know about borrowing money, is it's really not income, but you have to earn it. Let's look at how we actually earn credit, and that's through the 5 C's of credit. The first is capacity, or simply the income. Do you have income to pay back the loan? The next is capital, or cash. Do you have cash to make the down payment or cash to bring to the table for closing costs? Next is collateral. What is the guarantee for payment? And lenders will look at that because they want to make sure that if you don't pay, pay that monthly installment, for example, they have something to come back and again liquidate as a guarantee of that payment. The next is your character. What is your character like? And I'm not talking Looney Tunes. I'm talking about your credit history. How have you met obligations in the past? And the last C of credit is condition, and that may be economic or political, things really beyond our control that makes it harder to get credit. So this is what lenders actually look at when they're determining if you can qualify for credit or not. So you do have to earn it based on all of at least 1 through 4. Number 5, we don't have a lot of control over it, but again, it's still going to affect our ability to get credit. So let's talk about that credit history, and that's through credit reports. Now, credit reports are, basically it's an overall picture of how you've used other people's money. Have you paid it back? Have you been on time? What is the amount of debt that you have that you still owe, et cetera, et cetera. And it's simply a compilation of information from creditors. The 3 bureaus that report this information, Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion, their contact information is here. They simply get the lenders report the information to them, and they compile a report under your name and social. And credit reports are not static. They change all the time. The creditors have usually report every 30 days. So that means at least every 30 days, in theory, your credit report is changing. So when you look at, wanting to improve your credit, it's not going to take a whole long, it's going to change rather quickly, if you will. And let's move on and actually find out how that works. Now, free credit reports, information is reported about you. The government says that you should have access to that, and that, of course, is through annualcreditreport.com or the contact information on the screen. Now, the credit reports, you can get one from each of the credit bureaus every 12 months. So it's a great idea to make sure that you're monitoring your credit and you're requesting those free credit reports once every 12 months. And you may ask yourself, well, why should I get 3? Aren't they all the same? Well, actually, they're not all the same because a creditor has an option to report to one of the bureaus or all 3. So the information may not be the same. So that's why it's a good idea to check all 3 reports once a year. And if you note on the bottom, the free credit reports don't contain your score, but they do take credit cards if you want to order your score. Go figure that one. So let's talk about credit scoring, because I think a lot of our life is sort of, whittles down to a number, so to speak, and credit is no different. So credit score is a number that represents the likelihood of you repaying a loan. And it is calculated, it's a complicated statistical program using the information, both qualitative and quantitative, on your credit report. So how does the credit, what is in a credit score, and what affects it, and what does it really entail? So let's take a look at that. FICO scores, or FICO scoring model, is only one of the scoring programs out there. It's very common It's all over the television, you know, my FICO score, all that good stuff. So we'll take a look at that and what they consider factors of their credit scores. 35% of the score has to do with payment history. Have you made your payments on time? 30% of your score has to do with the amount of debt you have. The lower, the better. Next, 15% is the length of your credit history. And this you can't do a whole lot with. It is what it is. You've used it for as long as you have. You know, the longer, the better. But again, it is what it is. Next is the type of debt. 10% of your score has to do with that. And we talked about the types of debt before, where you have installment debt, you have revolving debt. And for scoring purposes, installment debt is seen as a little bit better because it's often harder to get than like a credit card. And then the last portion of your credit score has to do, 10% has to do with new credit, or how many times you're applying for credit. I often hear it's a very common misconception that if I apply for credit, my score is going to drop 10 points. Well, that's a gross sort of exaggeration of what may or may not happen. Some people, you know, depending on the other stuff that's on their credit report, a new inquiry, a new application for credit isn't going to do anything. If you have very little credit history and it's not great, applying for new credit may hurt you even more. So it really depends. You know, it depends on what your situation is. But the rule of thumb is don't be scared by something that may affect, you know, only has 10% of effect on your credit score. So how much is too much when we're talking about the amount of debt that you have? And we look at that with a couple of things, and the ratios are a very common way of measuring that. One is the debt-to-income ratio. How much of your monthly income are you using to pay off debt is really what it's saying. So you take the monthly debt payment divided by your gross monthly income, and it should be less than 10%. Now, this is not including any debt on your home. Okay, so this is, we're talking about credit cards, student loan debt, car payments, things like that. So again, it should be less than 10%. Then the next ratio is the utilization ratio, or how much of your available credit are you in fact using. So you take your total debt divided by your available credit, and it should be less than 30%. So when you hear, here's an example of you know, somebody saying they're maxed out their credit cards, that means they're using 100% of their available credit. Their utilization ratio is 100%, which in this case, a score of 100% or a grade of 100% isn't good. So these are some guidelines of how much is too much. The fourth thing we should know is it can be taken away. There are warning signs. If your ratios are too high, if you're unable to make minimum payments, if you're essentially robbing Peter to pay Paul, using one credit account to pay another, if you're getting calls from creditors or collection agencies, it may be time to take a closer look at your credit and see how it can be improved. However, know that there are consequences to compromised or poor credit. Consequences of not paying your bills. With revolving credit accounts, the purchases will be declined and your interest rates are going to go sky high. With installment debt, you may have be forcing foreclosure or have your secured debt a repossession, or your wages may be garnished in the case of student loans. Service debt, you're going to have your service shut off if you don't pay your bills. So there are consequences to, you know, besides the phone calls and things like that, there are consequences to having credit issues. One of the main problems with compromised credit is, of course, it's going to cost you more in the long run. For example, FICO scores generally range between 300 and 850. If you are in the top FICO score range, which means you pay on time, you have low debt, you're a responsible user of credit, $10,000 for a 48-month used car loan, as in we saw with the Anna case, 3.36%. Monthly payment $223. Total interest paid for that loan is $702. if your credit is between 620 and 660 essentially, that interest rate goes up to 9.3727%, or the cost of that credit, the cost of that loan will be over $2,000. Now, if you really have some credit issues, poor credit, 550 to 590-ish, 14.34%, or that same loan will cost you almost $3,200. So this is the risk to cost relationship. The riskier you are, or the more likely to default, the lenders are going to charge you more. So this is a big, big argument for making sure that we're using credit responsibly and borrowing to grow. So overall, our grades do matter. If you have poor credit, your insurance costs are going to be higher, because it's just statistically shown that people with poor credit are more likely to file an insurance claim. Of course, in housing, you're applying for, you want to rent an apartment, the landlord is definitely going to check your credit. If you're not making payments on time, what is the likelihood of you making your rent payment late, which is pretty good. So that's going to affect your housing and your housing choices. Last but not least, poor credit can prevent you from getting a job. There are many employers who now require a credit review before hiring someone. And yes, they do have to have your written permission in order to do that. But the theory here is, if you're not paying, your own obligations, you're not meeting your own financial obligations, how are you going to, be responsible with the company's money, essentially? And also, employees with compromised credit are more likely to engage in employee theft by statistics. So, number 5, it can be repaired in all of this. I'm going to go through this very quickly. If you do want the PowerPoint slides, you can read through this a little bit more. But know that there are several methods for repairing your credit. You can do it on your own through a money map, making sure that you're, paying those bills on time, contact creditors for a reduced interest rate, et cetera, et cetera. The next is, how do you actually determine how to pay off those debts if you're going to do it on your own? Well, you can start looking at the type of debt. A secured debt would be important to address first. If you don't make your car payment in this situation, you're going to have that car repossessed. You can look at the annual percentage rate. You may want to look at paying the highest interest rate first. You may look at the remaining balance. Paying off a small account first might give us that little victory that we need to move forward and continuing paying down on our debt. You may look at the number of payments that you're behind, or the amount of behind, or you may look at a collection account. Paying those off first. There's no magic method for doing this. You have to figure out what you're comfortable with and make sure that you put it in a manageable plan. Okay. You can repair it with credit counseling, and again, I'm going to go through this very quickly. There are options of engaging in debt management programs through counseling agencies, where basically you make one payment to the credit counseling agency, and they disperse that payment to your creditors. There might be debt settlement options for you. This is when you hear, settle your debts for pennies on the dollar. And not necessarily a good thing, because debt that's forgiven in this manner is taxable, and you will receive a 1099 at the end of the year if it's over $600. So think very, very cautiously about that. And then bankruptcy is always an option. It's a fresh start to get us back on our feet. Last but not least, 6 key things we should know: it's an asset. Invest in your good credit. And the returns are more money in your pocket, which you can save, better insurance rates, housing options, and employment options are going to be very good for you. So how do we borrow to grow? Last but not least, wisely use only what you need, invest in yourself, and buy assets, because you want to borrow to grow. A little bit on predatory lending. Too good to be true. If it sounds too good, it really is. In this case, have you ever really seen a burger that looks like this? Probably not. It's all artificial. Same with predatory lending. Paying too much being asked to sign a blank form, being offered more money than you need, changing terms at closing. All signs are of predatory lending, which means the lender is taking advantage of you. Okay, so last but not least, really this time, we've covered borrow to grow, 6 key things we should know: the cost of borrowing money, credit reports and scores and how lenders use them, risk to cost relationship, and ways to improve credit worthiness. So I thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk very quickly about credit, and I hope that when you use credit in the future, you will borrow to grow.
Thank you, Holly. We did have one question that came in about, do credit checks affect your credit score? You covered that, I think, when you were talking about the sort of misconception that it's always a 10-point hit. But is there anything else that you wanted to mention on that?
Yeah, just when we request our own free credit reports, it does not affect us for scoring at all. So it's only when you're actually applying for credit that it will.
Right, and any of those other informational ones don't count either. So like when the insurance company, for example, pulls your credit, to see if they should adjust your, what you're paying, that also doesn't impact your credit score as well, right?
The credit will be reported that they have that entry, but it won't affect your actual score.
Yep. All right, great. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. We're going to transition next to our next presenter. Maggie is with MindBlown Labs and is the learning architect at MindBlown Labs. So Maggie, I am sending the controls here over to you.
Great. Can you all hear me?
I can, and I can see your screen, so we're doing well.
Excellent. Well, Holly, thank you so much for that information. It really, listening to your presentation, really amplifies the importance for preparing young people to understand all of these kind of under-taught concepts that can really send us in one direction or the other financially. So I'm here to tell you all about a curriculum and a game that you can use in your classroom to help students kind of deconstruct these concepts in a really fun way. So again, my name is Maggie Kundson, and I'm representing MindBlown Labs from Oakland, California. And we created a virtual reality-based video game that can be played on most electronic devices, including Apple and Android smartphones, tablets, laptops, desktop computers, and Chromebooks. So today, I'm going to give you an overview of what we call the Thrive and Shine experience, which includes the game and the curriculum used together, although they could be used separately. We're going to talk about the curriculum, the assessments that go along with it, the game that students use on their devices, a little bit on the theory of game-based learning, and then next steps for you if you want to use Thrive and Shine. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background on our company. Who you see in front of you in the picture on the left is Jason Young and Ty Brown, and they are our co-founders and co-CEOs. They, together, about 4 years ago, developed a company with the mission to create highly interactive, experiential learning tools to empower young people to make better life decisions. And there's a lot of talk about building financial literacy, which, as most of you maybe consider, developing financial know-how, understanding the content knowledge around finances and personal finance. We agree that that's very important, but want to take it to the next level. And we call it financial capability. And it really implies that students not only learn the financial know-how, but they learn how to develop and practice positive financial behaviors and have opportunities to practice their financial know-how. So the Thrive and Shine experience, as I mentioned, is a hybrid learning experience designed for middle and high schoolers, although it has been used in upper elementary and has been used in students transitioning to college and first-year college students. And it does involve the game called Thrive and Shine, which I'm going to give you an overview of today, and then some in-class lessons. So today we're going to look at the lessons first, and then we'll look at the game. To give you a bit of an image and a little bit of foundation for the rest of the presentation, I want to show you this brief trailer for the Thrive and Shine experience. So this will just be a couple minutes, and then I'll come back on after the video. Oops, one moment.
Thrive and Shine is a hybrid learning experience, which combines a mobile and web-based game with an interactive, hands-on, and easy-to-use curriculum for classroom teachers. In the game, students customize an avatar, go to work to earn money, then move through challenges called quests. Quests are designed to simulate real financial scenarios, including budgeting, saving, managing debt, paying taxes and bills, and buying a car. As students learn to balance their wants and needs, they can see how their actions impact their ability to save money over time. Game-based learning gives students the agency to create their own story and learn through experimenting and making mistakes in a virtual environment. Students are encouraged to practice the positive financial behaviors they are learning in class by earning rewards and progressing to the next level in the game. To win, players must master and consistently demonstrate positive financial behaviors. Classroom sessions are based on a downloadable curriculum, which includes a teacher's guide and thoughtfully designed, engaging lessons. Developed by teachers, these high-quality lessons aim to engage every student through simulation activities, collaborative group work, and thought-provoking discussion questions. Teachers also receive quick and easy formative assessments, as well as section quizzes and a final summative assessment, all while tracking student progress through an online dashboard. The Thrive and Shine experience revolutionizes personal finance education by simplifying complex topics and making them both relevant and engaging. MindBlown Labs has created a fun, educational experience that will help your students learn to thrive in the real world.
All right, so we're back. We're going to talk a little bit about the skeleton of this experience, and what I mean by that is the learning outcomes that the game and the lessons are all based on. This document is, and I'm a former teacher, I was in the classroom for more than 20 years, so this is a document that was also always really helpful for me when I was adopting a new curriculum. It's called a scope and sequence document, of which most of you are familiar. The way this one is organized is by topic, and you can see this middle row here shows the topics that are covered. I will say this is the first of 2 pages because there are actually 10 lessons to the game, but we're not going to go over everything today. But I want to familiarize you with how the game is really aligned to what teachers are exposing students to in the classroom. So for example, let's just jump in at day 3 here in the lower left-hand corner. You can see that the topic that is covered in for that day is expenses and net worth. So the learning objectives that the lesson that is going to be taught in the classroom is based on are right down here. They're net worth, the needs, that needs are expenses, expenses are paid from earnings, taxes are taken out of earned income. So those are some of the key concepts that students will be learning in the in-class lesson. The game content that goes along with that is really structured around what we call quests, and there are challenges within the game that students have to complete using positive financial behaviors, and they may or may not pass them the first time. Often there are several quests that students have to try several times, and that's really part of game-based learning, which is this try, fail, learn cycle. So the quests that would be aligned with this particular lesson are generating income to get charged a certain amount in taxes, spending money on as many different expenses as possible, and having positive money growth. So that middle one sometimes throws people for a loop. You know, why would we want to encourage students to spend money on as many different expenses as possible? Don't we want to encourage students not to spend frivolously or to any kind of extent? Game-based learning is not meant to entirely reflect reality. This particular quest is meant to help students budget for this quest. So when they see the quest that they're going to have to do a lot of spending, they know that they should maybe spend a day or two in the game earning money to prepare for this quest. So just like in real life when we have a holiday or birthday or vacation coming up, there are situations where we have to kind of plan for and prepare for greater expenditures. So this was the scope and sequence document. And now we're going to look a little bit more focused at the lessons. This is lesson 5. It consists of 2 pages, so the lessons are really designed to be easily used, referenced, adapted by teachers across a variety of settings. You can see that at the top of the lesson is a brief summary, so teachers can just kind of get a feel for what's going to be covered in that lesson. There are some key concepts, and we didn't use the word vocabulary because they're not all technically vocabulary words. Some of them are principles or larger ideas. And then you can see this grid here that is on every lesson. Along the left-hand side is the approximate pacing guide for the lesson, and most of the lessons are designed to fit inside of about a 55-minute time period. That being said, they're built in blocks so that teachers can get used to what those blocks are and take some out or push some to the next day or compact the lesson a little if they need to. Each lesson is started with a question of the day, and the question of the day usually pertains to students' own personal lives or the game. So it's meant to really engage students where they're at in the concept that is going to be introduced that day. Next, there is the stated objective of what we intend students to learn that day through the activities that will be presented. Then there are a series of either 1, 2, or 3 quests, and those are simulation or group-based challenges or activities that students engage in around the concept for that day. This is the second page of that lesson. So you can see that the concepts that are covered are always in bold so that teachers can kind of keep coming back to those concepts and use them repeatedly in the instruction. There's also a debrief period, a 5-minute time period allotted for teachers to distribute an exit ticket if you want to use that form of formative assessment. There's a period for teachers to review the key concepts, and then there is a little bit of homework. And again, teachers can use or not use that or adapt it. The homework throughout this unit would mostly be playing the game for about 30 minutes a night. There are a couple lessons that require students to maybe ask parents. Like I remember one lesson happens to be asking the adults that you live with who may own cars, and if not, they could ask an adult at the school or some other person they're acquainted with. What are the other expenses to owning a car besides the car loan? So there are just short homework assignments, if not just the 30-minute homework of playing the game. Along with the lesson, the curriculum, the teachers are provided what's called an interactive student notebook. We refer to it as the ISN. And it is the kind of a workbook sort of thing, but they're not kind of less meaningful worksheets. They're actually really thoughtfully designed graphic organizers and question answer sequences for students to engage either on their own or with pairs or in small groups around these meaningful concepts that are introduced in the lesson and in the game. So this particular lesson has students thinking about budgeting. And so the quote of the day is, why do you think time is utilized as a resource in which you spend to get things in Thrive and Shine? And what wants and needs does your avatar have? And then students are asked to think about their life in 10 years. So what are some of the lifestyle choices they predict they might make for their life in 10 years? And these pertain mostly to choices that are going to affect their budget. So they do some thinking on this page about decisions they want to make. Then they go to this next page, and you can see that each row is kind of a line item on a budget. And they make a choice, and we'll just look at one, let's say food. So in the food column, they can choose that in 10 years they're going to mostly cook at home and help out with groceries, which would cost maybe $200 a month. They could eat out once a week, which would increase their budget to about $275 a month. Or they could say that they want to eat out 2 to 3 times a week with coffee and ice cream trips, so kind of the luxury option. They go through this process for all of these different budget items, and then the next step in this lesson is that they take the occupation that they chose in a previous lesson, and they take one of the early average salaries for that occupation, account for taxes, and then divide it by 12, and that is their monthly income, and then they compare it with what they had planned for their life in 10 years. Then they go back in a recursive sort of way and make adjustments to their budget. So that gives you a little bit of a flavor for what the lessons are like. Along with this curriculum, there are 3 different assessment options that teachers can choose from. We talked a little bit about the exit tickets that are available with each lesson. There's also, I'm going to skip to the bottom bullet point here, digital pre- and post assessments that are available within the game. There's actually in the menu bar, students can choose pre- and post assessment, which brings them right to a link on a separate website where they answer questions before and after the game and the unit so that teachers can see the growth in student learning. And then there's also one of our new features we're really excited about is our online teacher dashboard. It allows teachers to track the time that students have played in hours, minutes, and seconds, and also their progress in the game, which doesn't always align with how long they've played. The teacher dashboard also gives teachers notifications called Kudos and Cautions, which we'll talk about in a minute. So this is an example of the exit ticket. I'm not sure if you can, how big the font is on your device that you're using for the webinar today, but this one says, what do you think is going to be the biggest challenge in achieving a positive monthly balance when you are living on your own? Use the key concepts in your writing if they apply. So that's one example of the exit ticket. Now I'm going to get to the dashboard. The dashboard is where teachers initially set up their accounts to use Thrive and Shine in their classrooms. You're going to go to a website with a code that has been given to you. You're going to use your email address, create a login password, and then that will generate this screen that you see before you. And it will give you a group ID or a player code, and that's the ID that you're going to give to your students to play the game on their devices. Then you can see this class's name has been called Occur 2016, and if you click on those double arrows to the right, you will go to the next screen and see the details for your class. Now I'll say that if you teach at a middle school or high school level where you're using this curriculum in more than one class, you'll see multiple classes listed here, and you would click on the double arrows for that class to see the information for those students. This left-hand column will show how many students have created avatars in that class. And then at the bottom of all of the dashboard screens are the tips and tricks, some tutorials for teachers to better understand how to utilize the dashboard with their class. So this is the screen that you would get to by clicking on those double arrows, and each one of these rows represents a student avatar. And so you can see that the far left column shows how long a student has played. So this student has played 39 minutes and 34 seconds. They're at chapter 2 out of 10 chapters that exist in the game. The username is here. The password is here. This is the name of her avatar. This plus and minus is the Kudos and Cautions. And the Kudos and Cautions are, as I said before, they're notifications for the teachers. Kudos are notifications that students have passed major milestones in the game and that they're on the right track. And cautions are, it's kind of hard to explain this because it really pertains to the engineering and back end of the creation of this game and how it's aligned with the dashboard. But what happens is as students move through the game and do certain behaviors, it can set certain triggers so that teachers can be notified if they, for example, have failed a quest more than 3 times, if they haven't played the game in a certain period of time. it would be all of the red flags that a teacher would want to know if a student is actually really struggling or disengaging in the game. And so that way teachers can go and have a one-on-one conversation with that student or a check-in. And then when you have checked in with that student, you can hit this recycle and it will totally reset the Kudos and Cautions as a signal to teachers that you have addressed any issues with that student. The letter grade that's on here is useful for some teachers and not others. It's basically aligned with the progress in the game, because as students move through the game, they're having to master these concepts in order to move forward. So the progress in the game is really linked to students uptaking the objectives in the game. Going to move forward now. So when teachers want to implement Thrive and Shine, it's really an easy process. As I said before, you go to the dashboard website, which will get you this information towards the end of the presentation. You input a code from MindBlown Labs to create your class and generate your player code. You have students download the game on their devices and input the player code from you. And then once they've created their avatar in the game, they can take the pre-assessment using the link within the game and then just start playing. The teacher can go back onto your dashboard and see all of your students' accounts generated on the dashboard and start tracking your students. So it's quite easy. So getting into the nitty-gritty of the game. So the first thing that students will do is create an avatar. They can choose a boy, a girl, or a gender-neutral figure. They design all the different features on the face, including hair color and style and things like that, and color of hair, eyes, skin, lips, things of that nature. There are over 1 billion permutations of avatars that can be created, so students really enjoy either making a crazy-looking avatar or making an avatar that looks like them. The next phase is they go to the first town called Acorn Hollow, and this is students will never see this whole map on their screen. They actually use the touchscreen feature to move around this town. And you can see, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but at the top of the screen you can see the recycling plant with that yellow recycling emblem. That is where students go to work. We'll talk about that in a minute. But this is, they'll get to know this town pretty well because each one of these buildings actually is a place where they will need to interact, either to meet their needs of socializing, eating, or sleeping. And then this rocket ship right south of the river is where they will go when they complete Chapter 4 and met certain financial goals. They'll be able to fly away in a rocket ship, and they're actually going to go to a whole other town. There are 3 towns total that they'll be traveling to and from in buses, taxis, their own vehicle, etc. So getting to the mini games here, this is how students earn money in the game. Their job is to be a recycler at a recycling plant, and there are many different iterations of this game, this recycling game that they play. So what happens, it's a timed game where they take these tokens that shoot out of this generator, and they are either cardboard or metal or plastic, and they have to sort them into the correct bin, and it's color-coded as well, so it's easy as a visual to see. You can see the time at the top where it says 52 or 37 and that little alarm clock. That shows how much time is left in that particular game. The bar across the top shows how many points they've accumulated to get 1, 2, or 3 stars in each minigame. The stars are aligned to a point value, which is associated with an amount of virtual money that they'll earn to get through the game, to spend on their wants and needs and their expenses in the game. This is the series of end-of-day screens. The first screen in the end of the day is the Pay My Bills screen, and this particular one is probably taken from maybe halfway through the game where they have these expenses have accumulated. At the beginning, they're only paying rent, and they're living with their cousin Naomi, and they pay about $20 a day to live with their cousin Naomi. But as the game progresses and they earn more money, they actually start accumulating more expenses. Students can click on any of these white buttons, the rent, taxes, utilities, or insurance, to get more information about what that amount comes from. They can click to the left of that white button to identify that they want to pay that bill that day. So they can choose not to pay their bills, and they'll face the realistic consequences For example, if they choose not to pay taxes, they'll get a pop-up screen that says if you choose not to pay your taxes, that's going to increase your chance of getting audited, which can happen in the game. Moving on to the second end of day screen, they have a chance to transfer their money electronically from their savings account to their checking or their checking to their savings. And the different quests in the game will require them to do that. And then the last screen is gives them their net change for the day. So they can see their total income for the day, their total expenses for the day, and what their net change is for that day. And those amounts, by the way, on the right-hand screen are not really representative of what students are earning. I think that those are just taken from a screenshot in the development. All right, so another major feature of the game is the quests. Now, the quests are a series of challenges. There are about 40 to 45 quests in the whole game. And each chapter has between like 6 and 12 quests that students need to complete in order to move on in the game. So this is the far left screenshot here is an example of what the quest screen will look like. These, the middle screen shows these different quest books, and they, the ones with check marks on them show that they've already made it through that chapter, and those quests have been completed. And the screenshot to the far right shows an example of what will happen when you click on one of those boxes over here where it says 0102. The quest will pop up, and it tells students what the objective of the quest is, how long they have to complete the quest, what the reward is to complete the quest. There's also a bonus if they complete it to this higher level, and that is quests. The quests are listed on that scope and sequence sheet across the top row now to kind of start tying everything together. Now, game-based learning is obviously incorporates video gaming and technology, and at the surface level seems just super fun and engaging and exciting, but it actually is based in some well-researched pedagogical approach. Really high-quality video games that are intended for learning adhere to a series of principles of game-based learning, and these are just a few. I talked earlier about the try, fail, learn cycle, and so having students make mistakes is a really important part of learning. Students in Thrive and Shine, for example, they get immediate feedback whether they passed a quest or not, and there are tutorial screens built into the game to help them along if they are challenged. They get to explore the towns. There's this exploration principle where they get to explore not only the limitations of their earning and spending, but also exploring the town and the non-playable characters and things like that. They get to take risks. They get repeated opportunities to practice these positive financial behaviors and many other principles on which this game is based that make it a really powerful learning experience. So I'm hoping that you have a few questions, but before we get to that, I just wanted to show you the next steps, and this PowerPoint presentation will be given to you on a PDF from Hillary in the next 48 hours, where you'll have this information at your disposal. But if you wanted to jot down some of this information right now, if you're interested, that could get you started right away. So if you're ready to get started with your class and create a dashboard and generate a code for your students, you should go to this bit.ly address at the top. If you have specific questions that you want to email to me, I'm more than happy to answer them. You can email me at maggie@mindblownlabs.com. And if you're kind of curious, but you're not quite ready to use it with your class, and you want to test drive the game on your own device, on your desktop computer or on your smartphone, you can use the code 973A4 by downloading Thrive and Shine to your device and entering that code, and you'll be able to start playing right away. So with that being said, I am going to turn it back to Hillary if there's any questions.
Thank you so much, Maggie. We did have a couple of questions, but before that, I'm going to go ahead. I just copied down that bit.ly link and the code to Desk Drive, and I'm sending it out in the chat function. So everybody should see over on their GoToWebinar control panel that link. Hopefully I grabbed it right, and also that code. So that'll stay there that you can reference. So I'm going to switch things back over here to my screen, and then let you know, first of all, it looks like you've got a couple of folks who are really excited about trying out Thrive and Shine on their end, and I think have some practical questions for you about timing and cost. So first of all, is there a cost associated for the curriculum or for the use of the program?
Thrive and Shine is free to teachers and students, so there's no cost.
Okay, great. And I noticed you guys recently have a new partnership with the Pennsylvania Credit Union Foundation too, so hopefully they're helping to support that here in Pennsylvania. And then the other questions are about timing. So we had one question about how many class periods this would take to do all of the lessons. You said about 55 minutes each or so. So how many of those class periods would that involve?
Yep, there are 10 lessons, so if you use them consecutively, it would be 2 weeks.
Okay, great. And then another question about how long on average will it take a student to successfully complete all the assignments?
Are you talking, I'm not sure about the game or the assignments.
Yeah, I think, yeah, to do the assignments and to do those 10 days include their time within the app, or is that sort of time on their own, or is that done in class that they would be on task within the game?
Got it. Well, the way that we design the curriculum is that the lessons would be only the in-class teacher-facilitated lessons, not the use of the game.
Okay.
It assumes that students are playing for about 30 minutes a day on their own time. That being said, we have found such a wide range of time that students are taking to complete the game. What we're finding is that students who are gamers, so to speak, they spend a lot of time, they understand that games have an internal grammar to them or structure, and they understand how to beat a game. It becomes more intuitive to them, and they can get through it in maybe 3 hours total is the fastest we've seen. Some students that I've worked with in particular who are not gamers, who gaming does not come as easily to them and they're struggling a little bit more, could take upwards of like 8 to 10 hours total over the 2 weeks to complete the game.
So you're saying that my 10-year-old could kick my butt? Because he's a natural and I struggle. I'm like, wait, swipe left, what do I do? Yeah. All right. Thank you so much. It looks like somebody said the bit.ly link that I shared, maybe I copied it down wrong, wasn't working. So maybe, Maggie, if you could go into that chat and make sure that we get everybody the correct link, or certainly it'll be in the PowerPoint that we upload, that would be great. So thank you so much. And I'm going to turn things over next to Dr. Andrew Hill, who's with the Federal Reserve Bank of Philadelphia and going to talk to us about what works, or we're learning about what works in financial education programs. So Andrew, are you there?
I'm here. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm going to get my PowerPoint up here, so hopefully everybody's seeing my PowerPoint. I want to share a little bit today about some of the successful research that's been done over the last couple of years in financial education. And I'm going to talk a little bit about a couple of papers that I've worked on, and then I'll share another paper that's really exciting that I'm very excited about that's come out in the literature recently that gives us a little bit of an idea about the long-run behaviors of students who've received personal financial education. So I want to first start off and say that all the views that I express today are my own and not necessarily those of my employer, the Federal Reserve Bank of Philadelphia, or those of the Federal Reserve System. So first I want to talk a little bit about some research that we've done on our Keys to Financial Success program. So many of you who are veterans of the webinar series have heard about this high school personal finance program. We've trained since 2001 about 380 teachers. Those teachers teach in about 170 schools in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware, and each year they reach over 10,000 students. let me just bring you up to speed for those of you who haven't heard about this program before. This is a partnership that we started in 2001 with the University of Delaware Center for Economic Education, and we had a number of goals. One was we wanted to provide high-quality training and materials to support the teaching of a semester high school personal finance course. So we knew that schools were thinking about how are they going to put in place a semester personal finance course, and we wanted to use our expertise to be able to assist and help with getting that up and running. So we give all the materials and we provide a week's training. We wanted those materials to be accurate and grounded in what we call the economic way of thinking. That is to say that they are sound in terms of the economic theory that's underlying them. And we wanted to provide a lot of flexibility for teachers to use these materials in any curriculum, or I should say in any department. So we have family and consumer science teachers, we have business ed teachers, we have social studies teachers, all teaching this program. And the most important thing, or one of the important things also, is we wanted to be able to assess the effectiveness of this program using the highest quality statistical methods, using pre and post testing of students. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about the results that have come out of those studies. So we've been able to do some research and get those papers published. KEYS is a 52-lesson curriculum package, so if you're looking for a way in which to get up and running quickly with a semester personal finance course, or you're looking to retool a semester personal finance course in a high school classroom, you might consider our KEYS to Financial Success program. And it organizes really existing materials into a full semester course. And teachers receive 30 hours of professional development. So we take a set of lessons from the Council for Economic Education. This includes 19 lessons from their Financial Fitness for Life, 6 lessons from Learning, Earning, Investing, as well as 6 additional lessons that are available on their Virtual Economics thumb drive, which we give to every teacher. And we put that into our KEYS to Financial Success model. We also take 7 lessons from Visa Practical Money Skills, and then we produced another 23 lessons in order to fill in the gaps in order to create a semester personal finance course. And really one of the key and most important parts of this curriculum is training teachers, that is developing their pedagogical content knowledge around how to teach personal finance and use this model. And then they take that knowledge and take those resources out and teach students in their classroom. So let's get right into talking about the study. So this is a paper that I wrote with my colleagues Carlos Asarda and Bonnie Mazeros at the University of Delaware. It was published in 2014 in the International Review of Economics Education. And what we did is we pre- and post-tested students using a nationally normed personal finance instrument. And in this case, it was the Financial Fitness for Life high school test. And there's a number of reasons why it's important to use this test. One is the test is very well correlated to the material that's in the course. And the other thing is we knew, based on the norming of that test, what could be expected for a typical high school student, what could be expected in terms of their performance on the test. So in this case, for this paper, we were using our 2011-2012 school year and our 2012-2013 school year semester students. And you'll see that we have a relatively large percentage who are under 16 years of age, and we have roughly half and half males and females. And that I'll talk a little bit about males and females as well as their age in a minute. Overall, our results show that students in the KEYS to Financial Success program, or I should say students who take a KEYS to Financial Success course from a teacher that we've trained, show very large and highly statistically significant gains in their personal finance knowledge as measured by this test. So what am I showing in this graph here? Well, the red number above the dark black line there, you see the pre-test scores. So the red one is actually our KEYS to Financial Success students on the pretest, and the blue is actually the norming sample. So these were students who did not have Financial Fitness for Life, and they were given the test as part of the norming process. So this is our comparison group. So you see that our students start from a little bit worse perspective in terms of their personal finance knowledge. At the post-test, our students in the KEYS to Financial Success program wind up getting almost 67% correct on the test. No doubt it's a tough test, but the students who we can compare those with, those students who had just had Financial Fitness for Life high school curriculum, when the test was normed, they got a 56. So we have very large gains, and our students are outpacing then in the end the students who had just financial fitness for life. And that makes a lot of sense because we know that we have a large intervention. This is a large semester course. It's a lot of personal finance that they're learning, but it also really brings out in terms of getting significant results. So in terms of what does this tell us about students' financial education knowledge? In that same paper, we published a lot of results at what we call the standards level. So there you see A, income, B, money management. Those are standards sections from the original Jumpstart standards. And then we also can look at individual benchmark levels or concept levels within that. So there's a number of different questions that feed into this. And by the way, all of this is described in the paper as well as in the test administrator's manual that goes with the Financial Fitness for Life test. But what I've highlighted there are a couple of questions where the students at the pretest level do really, really poorly. So they don't know a lot about opportunity cost, and they don't know much about the effect that inflation could have on investment returns. So we really are getting some understanding about where are students before they come into a personal finance course. So these are the things that we really need to work to get the most lift out of. Looking at the other two sections of the test, one is on the spending and credit standard and the other is on the saving and investing standard. We again have a number of areas where students really struggle as high school students. They don't have much knowledge at all about sources of credit, about credit history and records, about the rights and responsibilities of buyers and sellers, about saving and investing, or about the rate of return on investments. Now, admittedly, these are tough questions that they're being asked to answer, but nonetheless, these are some significant areas where they struggle. It's also interesting, I think, to note some of the areas where the students do understand. So they're coming in at high school and they understand the basic idea that they need to save money and why that is. So that's probably an area we don't need to do a whole lot of work on. And when you look at the norming results from the Financial Fitness for Life test, those students did very well in that question as well. Just comparing again our results to the results from the norming, you see that our students do better at every level. And again, that's because they're probably spending more time on task than were the students in the comparison group. So that's our overall results. That was in the 2014 paper. I have another paper with Carlos Asarda that's coming out in the International Handbook for Financial Literacy from Springer this year. And in that paper, we really looked at males and females differences. Now, one of the important things also about this paper is this is the first time that any of the results for males versus females are at this, and also at this disaggregated level, at the question and standard level, have been available from the norming. We actually went back to the folks that wrote the original Financial Fitness for Life test, and we were able to get comparisons. So what am I showing in this graph? Here I'm showing the percent correct, and the darker blue and the darker pink are for the key students at the pre-test level on the left-hand side of this graph and at the post-test level on the right-hand side of the graph. The lighter ones, the light blue and the lighter pink, those are for males and females in that comparison group for the norming of the test, those students that we can compare to. And what we were really looking to see was, does Keys to Financial Success have any gender bias? And one of the things I think we were really expecting from the literature was that males would do better than females. Generally, that's what the literature up until this point has shown. And what we find is that there's not a statistical difference in student understanding between males and females, whether it be in the Keys group or in the norming group at the pre-test level. At the post-test level, we did see some differences, and in fact, our females did better, and so I've marked those. Our females did better by 1.61 percentage points overall than the males did, and on the norming, those females did better than the males as well. So overall, in both the Key sample and the Financial Fitness for Life high school test comparison group, the males and the females didn't differ that much before treatment, but the females did do slightly better than the males after they were taught personal finance. So that's, I think, a very interesting result because it's different than what the literature had shown. I've changed the graph format a little bit here. I'm showing the 4 standards areas: income, money management, spending and credit, and saving and investing. And I'm showing the keys group on the left, and I'm showing the comparison group on the right. And all I'm doing here is showing the differences between males and females in their scores, and this is in pre-test scores. So the only area that the males and females statistically differed in the keys sample was on the money management section. The females did better by over 2 percentage points. In the comparison group, it was the saving and investing section of the test that the females did better, and that was almost by 3.5 percentage points. So here I've given you a little summary statement. Our females exceeded our males in the keys group on the money management standard. On the comparison group, the norming of this test, it was females doing better on saving and investing. Now, looking at the post-test level, you'll actually see that our keys females do outpace the males by over 2 percentage points on the income, the money management, and the spending and credit sections of the test. They did not, in the end, on the saving and investing. The males and the females were not statistically different at the post-test level. But the difference between males and females in the comparison group was only statistically significant for that income standard in the comparison group, and that was almost 4%. So here again we have females exceeding the males in income, money management, and spending and credit for the keys group, and on the income standard alone for the comparison group. So what did we learn? Well, one, we've learned that keys to financial success can significantly increase students' personal finance knowledge. And I should mention that this is the largest documented increase in personal finance knowledge in the literature. And again, it's because keys is a robust, long course, relatively long, a semester course, whereas much of the things that have been studied in personal finance have really been relatively short interventions, whether it be a unit or a curriculum package or something like that. We know that training and materials matter, and we know that the females are slightly outperforming the males, which, again, is running counter to what a lot of the other literature has said in terms of males doing better than females. We attribute a lot of that, I think, to the unique nature of Financial Fitness for Life and its approach. So there are limitations. One is we don't know to what extent this knowledge decays after the student takes the course. And the other thing we don't know is how it's going to influence for future personal finance behavior. So we don't have the ability to track these students over time. We've done some more research. I have a paper with Rebecca Chambers that came out in Perspective of Economic Education Research, and we looked at teachers' human capital, and we showed that teachers attending the Keys to Financial Success training does increase their personal finance knowledge. We've also done some work, and we presented this paper last fall at a conference looking at semester versus year-long Keys courses, because we have some teachers who are teaching the Keys to Financial Success curriculum materials as part of a longer semester course that includes other materials, and we actually find that the semester courses result in students having higher student achievement in personal finance. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that those other semester courses, year-long courses where the keys is being infused, some of the other content materials perhaps taking a bit away from the personal finance. And then finally, we also looked at student age, because as I mentioned, we have a relatively large number of younger students, because a lot of the schools in which Keys is being offered, they're offering it as in freshman and sophomore years. And there's been a lot of talk in the literature and amongst people in the field about whether or not younger students can learn this material or not. And we showed that while the younger students actually start a Keys to Financial Success course with less personal finance knowledge on average, they catch up to the older students by the end of the course. So that really leads us to say, you can really put this course anywhere within the 4 high school grades. Let me talk a little bit about this other really exciting paper. It's by Carly Urban and her co-authors Schmeiser, Collins, and Brown. Now, what they were looking at was state financial education mandates. And what they looked at was a very robust data set of personal finance outcomes, in this case, particularly about credit scores of young people, as well as their delinquency rate, the rate at which they may have been delinquent on a 90-day delinquent on credit accounts. And they looked at states where the state put in place a high school personal finance mandate: Georgia, Idaho, and Texas, and then compared it to a nearby state that did not put in place a personal finance mandate for high school. And in each of the cases, they showed that for the cohort of young people that came before the mandate was put in place, there wasn't much difference between the comparison states or the control states and the treatment states, those states in which there was going to be a personal finance mandate. But look what happens afterwards. Now, at the bottom you see year 1, year 2, year 3. Those are in year 1, those are the students who were the first students to get the personal finance mandate. The 2 and 3 are the students who were in the second year after the mandate and the third year after the mandate. And guess what happens? Those students who've had personal finance in those required states wind up with credit scores that are higher than their comparison students in those control states. And the same thing is true in terms of this delinquency rate on credit accounts. We actually find that after the first year, or I should say they find that after the first year, students who have been exposed to personal finance through a mandate wind up having lower levels of delinquency on credit accounts. So this is great evidence that teaching students personal finance in high school does matter and has an effect on their future personal finance behaviors. I'll just leave that slide there for a second, which is the things that we have coming up. You can go out to our website, philadelphiafed.org/education, to find out about all of our teacher training programs that are coming up this summer. So Hillary, I'm going to turn it back to you now to wrap up the webinar.
Thank you so much, Andrew. If there's any questions, I can pose those to Andrew here in the last little bit that we have. If we don't, I want to say thank you to all of our presenters again for joining us. It's certainly a packed 90 minutes with a lot of great information, and I think that hopefully everybody really got a lot out of that. So again, thank you to Holly and to Maggie and to Andrew for joining us and sharing your expertise here with us this afternoon. I would just remind you that you can connect with us in a variety of outlets, like our Facebook page, follow us on Pinterest for lots of additional ideas, or as well on Twitter. If there are questions following the webinar, please don't hesitate to reach out, shoot me an email, and let me know how I can be of help to you. And with that, I want to bring our webinar to a close for today, and thank you very much for joining us.